The world was shocked. Not by another tabloid rumor. Not by whispers in the corridors of the palace. No, this time it was real. Princess Kate, the Duchess of Cambridge, had finally taken legal action against Meghan Markle. And the reason was explosive: leaked confidential medical records. Not just any records, but private health details about Kate herself, her children, and even Queen Elizabeth. It was the kind of betrayal that no one saw coming. The kind that shakes an entire monarchy to its core. For years, Meghan Markle had been portrayed as the outsider, the duchess who challenged royal traditions, who clashed with courtiers, and who made headlines for every public statement, interview, and appearance. Some loved her, some loathed her. But now, the stakes had changed entirely. This wasn't about palace etiquette or public opinion. This was about breaking the law. This was about a crime committed against the royal family itself. And Princess Kate, known for her calm composure and graceful public persona, had had enough. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It all began quietly. In the months leading up to the revelation, subtle signs pointed to something being amiss. Kate noticed irregularities, emails she hadn't sent appearing in circulation, journalists asking questions that no one outside the inner palace circle should have known. And slowly, a pattern emerged. Someone had accessed private files without permission. Someone had taken what was meant to remain confidential and exposed it to the world. And the culprit, according to palace insiders, was Meghan Markle. You might be asking yourself, how could this happen? How could someone inside the royal circle betray such trust? The answer, according to evidence provided by Kate's legal team, was both shocking and sophisticated. Meghan allegedly exploited insider access to obtain sensitive medical files, including mental health evaluations, physical checkups, and personal health histories. These were not just trivial documents. They were intimate details meant for the eyes of the royal medical staff and the Queen herself. And yet, somehow, they found their way into the hands of a U.S. journalist who promptly began publishing excerpts. The implications were enormous. In the United Kingdom, privacy and data protection laws are stringent. Unauthorized access and distribution of personal medical records constitute a serious criminal offense. For a member of the royal family to be targeted in this way was unprecedented. And for Meghan, a former actress turned duchess, it meant facing a legal battle that could have international ramifications. An arrest warrant was issued while she was in transit, making her movements carefully scrutinized and sending shockwaves through royal circles worldwide. Kate's team did not take this lightly. Months of preparation went into compiling evidence, documenting communications, and mapping out a legal strategy strong enough to withstand public scrutiny and Meghan's own defense. The Duchess of Cambridge, typically reserved and private, emerged as a figure of unyielding determination. Her goal was not vengeance, it was protection. Protection of her children, of her own privacy, and of the integrity of the monarchy. But the drama didn't stop at the legal level. Social media erupted. Headlines screamed across the globe. Meghan arrested for leaking Kate's private files. Royal feud turns criminal. Secrets exposed. Duchess under investigation. The story captivated audiences not just because it involved royalty, but because it touched on universal fears. What if your personal life were exposed? What if someone you trusted could betray you in such a profound way? And yet, beneath the headlines and viral clips, there was a deeper story. A story of family tension, of alliances and rivalries that have simmered for years. A story of a monarchy grappling with modern challenges, privacy, media scrutiny, and the relentless fascination of the public. The legal case was just the surface. Beneath it lay decades of complex relationships, unspoken resentments, and strategic maneuvering. In many ways, this moment marked a turning point for the British royal family. The stakes had never been higher. Princess Kate, always the composed and graceful public figure, now had to navigate not just the courtroom, but the court of public opinion. Meanwhile, Meghan Markle faced unprecedented scrutiny, not as a duchess, not as a public figure, but as someone accused of violating the law. And then there was the international dimension. Because the files had crossed borders, because journalists in the United States had received confidential documents, the case was no longer confined to the UK. International law enforcement and data protection authorities were involved, adding another layer of complexity to an already explosive situation. Suddenly, a family dispute had become a global legal spectacle. The tension was palpable. In the royal residences, whispers filled the halls. Courtiers speculated in hushed tones. Staff members spoke cautiously, aware that any leak could be the next headline. And through it all, Kate remained steadfast. She had decided that enough was enough. The time for patience and diplomacy was over. The time for action had arrived. Yet, despite the meticulous preparation, despite the formidable evidence, the situation remained volatile. Meghan's team was prepared to fight. They hinted at counterclaims, at alternative narratives, at strategies designed to discredit witnesses and evidence. The public, meanwhile, remained divided. Some supported Kate's pursuit of justice. Others questioned whether the royal family should be involved in legal battles at all. The story had layers upon layers of intrigue, each more compelling than the last. And in the midst of it all, one question lingered. What would Meghan do next? Would she comply with the legal proceedings, or would she attempt to evade them, escalating tensions even further? The answer, according to insiders, could change everything, not just for her, but for the entire monarchy. As the world waited with bated breath, the pieces of this complex puzzle began to fall into place. Kate's evidence was strong, her legal team determined, and the implications for the royal family unprecedented. The drama had shifted from rumors and headlines to legal action and criminal charges. Every moment, every revelation, every court filing became a high-stakes chapter in a story that had already captivated millions. And just when it seemed that the story had reached its peak, a new twist emerged. Documents surfaced showing the extent of the files Meghan allegedly accessed, details even more sensitive than initially thought. The files included not only health information, but private schedules, confidential communications, and strategic plans meant to remain strictly within the palace walls. The betrayal, if true, was total. The world had witnessed many royal scandals before, but this was different. This was not about public appearances, wardrobe choices, or media interviews. This was about trust, legality, and the protection of a family whose every move is scrutinized. Princess Kate had taken a stand, and the implications would reverberate for months, possibly years. And yet, despite the legal threats, despite the public attention, the most crucial moment was still to come. Because what Meghan did next, her immediate response to the arrest warrant, would shock the world, push the royal family into uncharted territory, and set the stage for an unprecedented confrontation. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Kate had always been the picture of composure. The Duchess of Cambridge moved through life with a grace that seemed effortless, a calm that could soothe tense rooms, and a keen intelligence that often went unnoticed behind her serene public image. But even she had limits. And in the weeks leading up to the legal action against Meghan Markle, those limits were tested in ways she had never imagined. It all began with subtle signs. A misplaced email here, a question from a journalist there, a passing comment that suggested someone outside the inner circle knew details that only she and her closest aides could possibly know. At first, she tried to dismiss it. Royal life was always under scrutiny. Rumors were part of the territory. But the pattern grew too pronounced to ignore. Kate would sit in her private office at Kensington Palace, sipping her tea, reviewing correspondence with her legal advisors, and yet feeling an unease that settled deep in her chest. Something was wrong. Something was being taken from her. Not possessions, not jewels, but something far more personal, far more intimate. Her privacy. The palace, as many may imagine, is a labyrinth of corridors, offices, and rooms, each with its own staff and its own level of access. In theory, it was secure. In practice, information flows like water, quietly, invisibly, and sometimes without consent. And over the past months, information that should have remained sealed within the palace walls began surfacing in the most unexpected places. Kate's thoughts often returned to her children. Princess Charlotte, a curious and bright young girl, and Prince Louis, the youngest, whose playful energy belied an understanding of the world around him. Their safety and privacy were paramount. The idea that their personal medical records, details of vaccinations, consultations, even minor illnesses, might have been accessed by someone with ulterior motives was terrifying. The Queen herself, a symbol of resilience and tradition, had always maintained strict privacy over her health matters. And yet, the specter of breach loomed over them all. It wasn't just the content of the files that concerned Kate, it was the intent behind accessing them. Whoever had done this wasn't a casual observer. This was calculated. Someone wanted to know exactly what they could leverage, exactly what could be used to create discomfort, embarrassment, or even a scandal. And according to preliminary reports, the finger pointed uncomfortably in one direction: Meghan Markle. To understand the gravity of the situation, one had to consider Meghan's trajectory. She had joined the royal family with charm, with promises of modernization and outreach, with a smile that seemed ready to embrace the world. But beneath that veneer, palace insiders had occasionally whispered, there were signs of impatience, ambition, and a willingness to push boundaries. Kate had always been cautious, watching the interactions, noting the tensions, but hoping that time and diplomacy would smooth over differences. And yet, the events leading up to the legal action made it clear that diplomacy alone was no longer enough. The files had been accessed in a way that suggested technical knowledge, insider understanding, and a network of contacts capable of bypassing the usual security measures. It was more than a breach. It was a deliberate act with consequences that could ripple far beyond the walls of Kensington Palace. Kate convened her closest advisors and legal team. Together, they reviewed logs, traced digital footprints, and cross-checked communication channels. The more they uncovered, the more concerning the picture became. There were indications that files had been deliberately targeted, not accidentally stumbled upon. Each piece of evidence pointed to methodical intent. And as Kate absorbed these findings, her usual calm hardened into determination. She realized that to protect her family, she would have to take action that was unprecedented in modern royal history. Yet, even as the legal preparations began, the emotional weight of the situation pressed on her. Kate was not only defending herself, but also navigating the fragile terrain of family relationships. Meghan was her sister-in-law, a woman who had once shared private moments and conversations within the family. Betrayal, therefore, carried not just legal implications, but deeply personal ones. The tension between familial bonds and the need for justice created a complex emotional landscape, one that Kate had to traverse with both strength and subtlety. Meanwhile, rumors began to circulate. Courtiers spoke in hushed tones about the brewing legal storm. Staff members speculated quietly, careful not to let leaks reach the press prematurely. And outside the palace, the media began to notice patterns in Meghan's interactions and statements. Social media, as ever, amplified every whisper, every subtle hint, turning them into viral narratives that the public consumed eagerly. Kate, aware of this, had to consider not only the facts of the case, but also the optics. Every move was scrutinized, every step could be interpreted, and every delay could be misread as hesitation or weakness. Amidst all this, Kate maintained her public duties with unwavering poise. Engagements, charitable appearances, and family commitments continued as scheduled. But behind the scenes, her life had shifted into a different rhythm, one marked by late-night strategy sessions, consultations with digital security experts, and careful planning with her legal counsel. She knew that once the legal action was launched, there would be no turning back. The Duchess also considered the potential fallout: an arrest warrant, international scrutiny, and the media circus that would inevitably follow could strain not only her immediate family, but the monarchy itself. Every detail had to be handled meticulously. Every document had to be airtight. Every public statement had to strike the delicate balance between strength and diplomacy. Kate understood that in the world of royalty, perception was as important as truth. But perhaps the most poignant moments came in the quiet of her private chambers. Sitting alone, reflecting on the betrayal, Kate thought about the broader implications. How could someone she had welcomed into the family act with such disregard for privacy and trust? How could personal ambition override the bonds of family? And more importantly, what would it take to ensure that her children, and their children, one day, would never have to face such a violation of trust? As the legal team prepared the initial filings, a sense of inevitability settled over Kate. The calm before the storm was over. The meticulous planning, the quiet gathering of evidence, and the careful assessment of risks had reached their conclusion. Now, action was required. The world would soon witness a royal legal battle unlike any other, one that would test the limits of family loyalty, public perception, and legal authority. And yet, even with all the preparation, Kate could not predict how Meghan would respond. Would she comply, deflect, or strike back? The uncertainty added another layer of tension to an already explosive situation. The next move, whoever made it, would change the course of events in ways that no one could anticipate. The palace corridors, usually filled with routine and ceremony, now hummed with quiet anticipation. Staff whispered, phones were checked more frequently, and every movement seemed charged with potential consequence. It was as if the very walls were aware that history was unfolding within them, that an unprecedented legal confrontation was about to erupt. And then came the first definitive proof, something so undeniable that it forced the hand of Princess Kate and her legal team. A single file, marked with sensitive medical details, clearly traced back to unauthorized access, a digital breadcrumb that illuminated the path of the breach. The evidence left no room for doubt. Someone had violated the trust of the royal family in a way that could not be ignored. Kate's determination solidified into resolve. The calm that had defined her public persona now gave way to a steely purpose. She would act. She would protect her family. And she would do so within the framework of the law, ensuring that justice was served without compromising the dignity of the monarchy. The calm before the storm had ended. The storm itself was about to begin. And as the first legal documents were filed, the world braced itself for a confrontation that would redefine royal privacy, test familial bonds, and captivate a global audience. But what happened next would escalate the tension far beyond what anyone inside the palace, or outside it, could have imagined. The first tangible proof landed on Kate's desk like a thunderclap. It wasn't a rumor. It wasn't a whisper from a distant source. It was a document, digital, time-stamped, undeniable, that revealed the unauthorized access. Her legal team had meticulously traced the file, following a trail of digital breadcrumbs that pointed unmistakably to Meghan Markle. The sense of violation was immediate and visceral. This was not merely a breach of etiquette or a careless mistake. This was deliberate, calculated, and potentially criminal. The document itself was benign to an outsider. A list of medical appointments, some notes from consultations, and personal health details that were supposed to remain strictly confidential. But to Kate, the implications were devastating. Every entry represented a private moment, a personal vulnerability, a trust that had been broken. The files included details about minor health issues for her children, consultations with physicians about stress and wellness, and even personal notes related to her own medical history. And shockingly, it included information about the Queen herself, details that were never meant to leave the walls of Buckingham Palace. Kate sat in her study, reviewing the evidence with a mix of disbelief and fury. The digital footprints were clear. Someone with high-level access had downloaded and distributed these files. The metadata suggested a deliberate effort to obscure the trail, but the investigation left no doubt. The breach had been sophisticated, methodical, and intentional. The fingerprints led back to Meghan's circle, and while legal caution demanded that they avoid public accusations without confirmation, the inner circle knew what the evidence suggested. Her legal team explained the gravity of the situation. In the UK, unauthorized access to confidential medical records isn't just a breach of privacy. It's a criminal offense, carrying severe penalties. Beyond the personal violation, it exposed the royal family to public embarrassment and media exploitation. The fact that the files had already reached a U.S. journalist complicated matters further, elevating the breach to an international concern. The ramifications were enormous, and time was critical. Kate's mind raced. How could this have happened? How could someone she had welcomed into her family act with such disregard for trust and privacy? For years, Meghan had been a presence at official events, private gatherings, and family celebrations. Yet, behind the facade of diplomacy and charm, evidence suggested a different narrative, a deliberate effort to obtain information that could be used for personal or public advantage. The legal strategy began to take shape. Kate's team meticulously cataloged each piece of evidence, ensuring every file, every email, every metadata trace was preserved. They worked with cybersecurity experts to confirm authenticity and to map the chain of custody. The team also prepared for potential defenses, anticipating arguments that Meghan's lawyers might raise about access, consent, or intent. But the truth was damning. Someone had crossed a line that had never been crossed before within the royal family. As Kate absorbed the implications, she also considered the broader impact. The breach wasn't just about her personal health information. It was about her children, her family, and the monarchy itself. The files could be weaponized, misinterpreted, or sensationalized. Private struggles could become public spectacle, family matters turned into headlines. Kate's resolve hardened. Protecting her children and her privacy wasn't optional, it was imperative. But there was more. The evidence revealed patterns suggesting that the breach was not an isolated incident. Multiple files had been accessed over several months, each carefully selected for maximum impact. The sophistication suggested planning and intent. Whoever was behind this understood the palace's internal systems, knew which files would be most damaging or sensational, and had the means to transmit them securely to external parties. The journalist in the United States became a focal point. The files had reached their hands through digital channels, leaving an unambiguous trail. Investigators traced the chain of custody, confirming that the journalist had received documents containing not just minor details, but deeply personal and sensitive information. The ethical implications for media outlets were profound, but for Kate, the immediate concern was clear. Her family's private life had been exposed, and it had been done deliberately. Kate considered the psychology behind the breach. Was it ambition, revenge, or a misguided attempt to assert power within the royal dynamics? Whatever the motive, the outcome was undeniable. Trust had been shattered. And in a family where trust forms the core of relationships, this was devastating. Courtiers whispered about the consequences, legal advisors stressed the severity, and the palace security team implemented additional protocols. Even as the legal preparations intensified, Kate maintained her public composure. She attended engagements, charitable functions, and family events with the calm elegance expected of a royal. But behind closed doors, every decision, every email, every conversation was scrutinized. Kate had to balance public perception with private strategy. Every step needed precision. Every word had to be considered. The more the legal team uncovered, the more alarming the picture became. Files accessed included not just routine medical records, but personal notes, mental health assessments, and sensitive discussions with doctors. The reach of the breach extended beyond what anyone had initially feared. It wasn't simply a matter of curiosity. It was a systematic invasion of privacy with far-reaching implications. Kate's team compiled an extensive report outlining every breach, every unauthorized access, and every potential legal violation. The document spanned dozens of pages, each detailing how the files were accessed, who might have been involved, and the potential consequences. It was exhaustive, leaving little room for ambiguity. And it made clear that the next step had to be legal action. Yet even as preparations for formal proceedings began, tension remained high. Meghan's potential response was unpredictable. Would she comply with legal requests? Would she deny involvement? Or would she attempt to counterattack, casting doubt on the legitimacy of the evidence? Every scenario was considered, every possibility weighed. The stakes were unprecedented, not just legally but emotionally. Amidst the strategic planning, Kate allowed herself a moment of reflection. The breach wasn't just an affront to her privacy, it was a wake-up call. It highlighted vulnerabilities within the royal family, gaps in security, and the risks inherent in modern life, where digital information flows more freely than ever. Protecting personal data had become a matter of urgency, and the lessons learned here would have lasting implications. And then came the first irrefutable confirmation. An internal palace audit traced file access logs to a device associated with Meghan's known activity. The logs showed timestamps, IP addresses, and specific files accessed, painting a clear and compelling picture of the breach. Legal advisors emphasized that this level of evidence was rare, almost unprecedented, and would form the backbone of Kate's case. The sense of urgency escalated. Kate's legal team coordinated with cybersecurity specialists, media consultants, and palace officials. The goal was clear: secure the evidence, plan the legal strategy, and prepare for the inevitable public fallout. Every precaution was taken to ensure that when action was taken, it would be indisputable, well-documented, and defensible. And yet, Even with all this preparation, one question loomed: how would Meghan respond? The breach had been exposed, the evidence undeniable, and the legal path set. But human behavior, especially under pressure, is unpredictable. Kate knew that the next move could escalate tensions, generate headlines, and push the conflict into new territory. As the documents were finalized, as the reports were reviewed, and as the first legal filings were prepared, the atmosphere within the palace was charged with anticipation. The calm had ended. The storm, which Kate had meticulously prepared for, was about to arrive. And just when it seemed that the situation had reached its peak, a shocking revelation emerged from the evidence. A detail that suggested the breach had been even more extensive than anyone had realized. The files accessed included not only routine medical records, but sensitive correspondence, private family schedules, and confidential strategy discussions. The implications were staggering. The room fell silent as the full extent of the breach became clear. Kate, composed but resolute, understood that the time for hesitation was over. The evidence was undeniable, the legal strategy in place, and the next step was inevitable. But what came next would take the story to a level of drama that no one, not even Kate, had anticipated. Across the Atlantic, in a bustling newsroom somewhere in the United States, a journalist clicked open an email that would soon ignite a firestorm. It wasn't just any email. It contained files, meticulously organized, with names, dates, and sensitive medical details that should have never left the walls of the British royal family. Princess Kate, her children, and even Queen Elizabeth herself were listed in this confidential trove. The journalist's first thought was disbelief. Surely, there had to be a mistake. Royals are heavily guarded, their private lives meticulously shielded from prying eyes. Yet, the evidence was undeniable. The files were authentic, time-stamped, and complete with metadata that confirmed their origin within the palace's secure system. Whoever had sent them had bypassed layers of protection and ensured delivery to someone capable of publishing, amplifying, and exploiting the information. This was no ordinary leak. It was calculated, deliberate, and precise. Someone had carefully considered the recipient, knowing the journalist had the reach and influence to make the information public. And, according to internal tracking, the path the files took led back to Meghan Markle. Inside Kensington Palace, Kate and her team were monitoring the situation closely. The moment the files were received by the U.S. journalist, the stakes escalated exponentially. This breach had gone international. No longer was it simply a matter of privacy within the UK. It now involved foreign media, cross-border data protection, and international law enforcement. Every second that passed increased the risk of wider exposure. Kate's legal advisors acted quickly. They contacted data protection authorities, cybersecurity experts, and legal specialists familiar with international cases. The strategy was multi-pronged: confirm the breach, secure evidence, and prepare to contain any further dissemination. The palace's IT team began tracing the digital trail, meticulously documenting IP addresses, file transfer logs, and communications. Every piece of data mattered. Every detail could become evidence in a potential court case. Meanwhile, the journalist faced an ethical dilemma. Publishing the information could catapult them into global headlines, but it also carried serious legal and moral consequences. Did they have the right to distribute deeply personal medical details? Were they complicit in a crime simply by receiving and potentially reporting on the files? These questions lingered as the newsroom buzzed with activity, editors debating whether to run the story and how to frame it responsibly. Back in the UK, Kate was acutely aware of the broader implications. The files weren't just personal, they represented a breach of trust at the highest levels. Royals are expected to navigate public life with discretion and dignity, but this was beyond the normal pressures of scrutiny. Private health information, meticulously guarded, had been weaponized. It wasn't just about embarrassment or gossip. It was about control, influence, and the potential to destabilize family dynamics. The breach also cast a spotlight on palace security protocols. How could someone access such sensitive information and transmit it abroad without detection? Kate's legal team and cybersecurity experts delved into the palace's internal systems, tracing every access point and identifying vulnerabilities. They discovered patterns that suggested not only deliberate targeting, but also advanced knowledge of how to navigate the palace's security measures. The sophistication was alarming. Questions swirled in Kate's mind. How much had been shared already? Could additional files still be in circulation? And, most importantly, what was Meghan's motive? Was this an attempt to gain leverage, to embarrass Kate publicly, or to assert influence within the royal family? The answers were uncertain, but one thing was clear. This was a strategic move with consequences that reached far beyond a simple family dispute. At the same time, the journalists in the U.S. began to understand the magnitude of the story. Royal medical records weren't just news. They were history, precedent, and scandal all rolled into one. The files contained personal medical histories, consultations about stress and mental health, and notes on minor illnesses that had never been publicly disclosed. Publishing them could provoke a media frenzy, legal challenges, and international diplomatic tensions. The files also hinted at larger patterns. In addition to Kate, there were documents concerning her children, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis. Their health details, routine appointments, vaccinations, and personal observations had been exposed. The thought that such information, intended to remain private, had been accessed and transmitted internationally was staggering. The implications for child safety and privacy were enormous. Kate's team prepared for every possible outcome. They documented each email, traced the digital paths, and ensured that evidence was preserved. They also drafted potential legal filings in case the files were further disseminated. Every precaution was taken to ensure that the breach could be addressed legally and decisively. The objective was clear: stop the spread, protect the family, and hold the responsible party accountable. Yet, despite these efforts, tension mounted. The journalists' next move was unpredictable. Would they publish immediately, hold the files for verification, or alert authorities? Each option carried risks, both for the royal family and for the journalist. The situation was volatile, delicate, and unprecedented. Kate understood that timing, strategy, and discretion were critical. As the international dimension unfolded, Kate also considered public perception. The story was likely to become global news, and the royal family's response would be scrutinized in every country. Maintaining credibility, authority, and composure was essential. Kate needed to ensure that the narrative focused on privacy, legality, and family protection, rather than personal vendettas or gossip. Meanwhile, internal palace discussions intensified. Advisors debated the best approach to mitigate risk, protect sensitive information, and coordinate with international authorities. Every decision had consequences, and the wrong move could escalate the situation dramatically. Kate remained at the center of these discussions, guiding strategy while managing her own emotions. The breach was personal, but the response had to be professional. The digital trail also revealed something alarming. The files were not just distributed passively. There was evidence of deliberate communication with media contacts, suggesting intent to publicize the sensitive information. This wasn't an accidental leak. It was a targeted campaign with calculated impact. The magnitude of the breach forced Kate's team to move quickly, coordinating with both domestic and international legal channels. As preparations for legal action accelerated, Kate reflected on the betrayal itself. This was someone she had once welcomed into her family, someone with whom she had shared moments of trust and familial interaction. Yet, the evidence suggested deliberate manipulation and exploitation of that trust. The emotional weight was immense. Protecting her family was not just a legal matter, it was a moral imperative. The stakes became even clearer when a preliminary assessment by UK data protection authorities confirmed that the file's dissemination constituted a serious violation of privacy laws. The combination of sensitive personal data, international transfer, and potential public exposure elevated the breach to a criminal offense. The royal family had never faced such a scenario before. And then, as if to punctuate the gravity of the situation, new evidence arrived. A secondary set of files, previously unaccounted for, appeared to contain additional confidential information. These files further confirmed the deliberate targeting of private medical records, and they suggested that the scope of the breach could be broader than initially suspected. Kate's legal team moved swiftly to document everything. The files were cataloged, the evidence verified, and a detailed report compiled. It was thorough, irrefutable, and ready for submission to the authorities. The path to legal action was clear, but the unfolding events also hinted at a confrontation that would be public, dramatic, and globally scrutinized. Every detail mattered: timestamps, digital footprints, the identity of the recipients, and the chain of custody. Kate understood that precision was essential. Any oversight could undermine the case, expose vulnerabilities, or provide leverage to Meghan's defense. The meticulous preparation underscored the seriousness of the situation. The international dimension also brought new challenges. Coordinating with foreign authorities, managing the media, and ensuring that the royal family's privacy was protected required a delicate balance of diplomacy, legal expertise, and strategic foresight. Kate, always composed in public, had to navigate this high-stakes terrain with care, determination, and unwavering focus. And yet, despite all the preparations, one question remained. How would Meghan respond once she realized the files had been traced, the evidence compiled, and legal action imminent? The next move could escalate tensions, provoke media frenzy, and push the family into uncharted territory. The files had crossed borders, ignited debates, and confirmed what Kate had feared: a deliberate, calculated breach of trust. The stage was set for a confrontation unlike anything the royal family had faced in modern history. But what happened next would propel the situation into an international crisis, and no one, not even Kate, could have anticipated the scale of the fallout. Leaking private medical records is a serious crime. In the United Kingdom, such actions are not merely unethical, they are illegal. Unauthorized access to personal health information falls under stringent data protection laws, and violations can carry severe criminal penalties, including fines and imprisonment. But the shocking part in this case was that the alleged offender was no ordinary citizen. It was Meghan Markle, a duchess, a public figure, and a member of the royal family. Kate's legal team understood immediately the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just a private betrayal or a matter of palace gossip. It was a legal infraction with the potential to set international precedent. The files contained personal and medical information, much of it related to Kate herself, her children, and even Queen Elizabeth. The very act of leaking such material could be construed as an attempt to cause harm, distress, or public embarrassment. And according to the law, intent mattered. The meticulous way the files had been accessed and transmitted suggested deliberate, premeditated action. To understand the weight of the offense, it helps to consider what was in the files. They included medical histories, treatment notes, mental health evaluations, and sensitive consultations that had never been made public. Each file represented intimate, private moments. Some were routine appointments. Others detailed conditions that, if exposed, could provoke speculation, gossip, or even misinterpretation. The invasion of privacy was total, and the implications could affect not just the individuals named, but the reputation of the royal family as a whole. Kate, ever methodical, reviewed the evidence alongside her advisors. The files had been accessed using credentials and permissions that were supposed to be strictly controlled. The breach appeared sophisticated, involving insider knowledge and an understanding of palace IT systems. Someone had not only gained unauthorized access, but had also deliberately distributed the information to a journalist abroad. The act was premeditated, strategic, and far-reaching. The legal implications were profound. Under UK law, unauthorized access and dissemination of personal data are prosecutable offenses. The Information Commissioner's Office, ICO, regulates data protection, and breaches involving sensitive health information carry enhanced penalties. If proven in court, the act could result in fines, civil damages, and potential criminal charges. And when the breach crossed international borders, U.S. involvement added another layer of complexity. International law enforcement agencies would have to cooperate, coordinate, and ensure that the legal process respected both countries' regulations. Kate's team also considered the potential defenses Meghan might employ. Could she claim accidental access? Lack of intent? Authorization through informal channels? Each scenario was analyzed, and each counterargument was prepared for. But the evidence suggested that this was not accidental. Files were accessed selectively, distributed to a journalist deliberately, and accompanied by communications that hinted at strategic intent. The breach was precise, not random. At the same time, Kate grappled with the emotional dimension of the situation. The law could address the technical breach, but it could not erase the sense of betrayal. This was a personal violation, a deliberate act by someone who had once been welcomed into the family. The pain of that breach was compounded by the public exposure of sensitive information. Even with strict legal action, the emotional fallout would linger. The media, of course, was quick to seize on the story. Headlines speculated about the nature of the breach, the identity of the journalist, and the potential consequences. Social media buzzed with debates, opinions, and heated arguments. Some defended Meghan, suggesting that the files had been misinterpreted or that the legal action was excessive. Others expressed outrage, emphasizing the seriousness of violating someone's private medical information. Amid this storm, Kate remained composed, knowing that public perception mattered but that the law and her family's safety were paramount. Within the palace, discussions intensified. Legal advisors, cybersecurity specialists, and senior staff worked together to trace every digital path, document every transaction, and prepare for the inevitable escalation. Security protocols were reviewed, additional safeguards implemented, and monitoring intensified. The royal family had never faced a breach of this magnitude, and the learning curve was steep. The evidence also suggested a pattern of intent. Files had been accessed repeatedly over time, rather than in a single instance. Certain documents were prioritized, including information about Kate's mental health, her children's well-being, and sensitive medical procedures. The selection of files indicated a calculated approach, targeting what could cause the most impact, harm, or embarrassment. Legal advisors noted that this pattern could be central to proving premeditation in court. Yet the situation was complicated by the international dimension. Because the files were transmitted to a U.S. journalist, the breach was no longer solely a UK legal matter. Coordination with American authorities was essential to track distribution, secure evidence, and prevent further unauthorized publication. International cooperation would be critical to ensuring that justice could be served and that the royal family's private information was protected. As Kate considered the broader ramifications, she realized that this legal action was about more than punishment. It was about establishing precedent. It was about ensuring that privacy, even for royals, could be defended in court. It was about sending a clear message. Trust could not be violated without consequences, and deliberate breaches of sensitive information would be taken seriously. Meanwhile, Meghan's potential responses loomed like a shadow. Would she cooperate with authorities, attempt to discredit the evidence, or claim misunderstanding and intent? Each possibility required preparation. Kate's legal team drafted responses, contingency plans, and public statements, ensuring that the narrative remained focused on legality and family protection rather than public drama. The emotional stakes, however, remained high. Kate had to navigate personal feelings of betrayal, the public gaze, and the potential legal complexities simultaneously. Her children's privacy, in particular, weighed heavily on her. The files contained details about Charlotte and Louis that were not only sensitive, but deeply personal. Exposure could have lasting consequences for their well-being and public perception. Protecting them was paramount. And then there was the Queen. Her own medical information had been part of the breach, adding another layer of sensitivity. The implications for monarchy security were profound. This was not just a family dispute. It was a challenge to the protocols that safeguarded the highest office of the land. Kate recognized that the stakes were unprecedented and the consequences far-reaching. As legal preparations continued, the palace braced for the inevitable. Court filings would formalize the charges, evidence would be presented, and Meghan would have to respond. The public would watch, the media would speculate, and the royal family's private matters would become a global spectacle. Every detail mattered, every document was scrutinized, and every decision carried weight. Yet even amidst this preparation, one question loomed larger than any other. How would Meghan react? The evidence was damning, the legal path clear, but human behavior is unpredictable. Could she attempt to evade consequences, discredit the evidence, or take a completely unexpected course of action that would change the dynamic entirely? Kate understood that the coming days would test not only the law but family bonds, public perception, and the resilience of the monarchy itself. The breach had already caused damage, but the next phase, legal proceedings and public scrutiny, would escalate the stakes in ways that no one could yet predict. And just when it seemed that the situation had reached its peak, a shocking new development emerged. Evidence suggested that Meghan had taken additional, previously undiscovered files, potentially widening the scope of the breach. The implications were staggering. What started as a serious privacy violation now threatened to become a full-blown international legal crisis. Kate's resolve solidified. The law would be the instrument of justice, and she would ensure that every step was executed with precision, diligence, and integrity. The breach had crossed a line, and it was time to respond decisively. But what Meghan did next would push the conflict beyond legality and into the realm of global scandal, and no one could have anticipated the shock that awaited. The news hit like a thunderbolt. An international arrest warrant had been issued for Meghan Markle. While the world was still processing the shocking details of the leaked files, Kate and her legal team had escalated the situation to its highest legal consequence. This was not merely a domestic issue anymore. This was now a global alert, a legal notice that crossed borders, signaling the seriousness of the alleged crimes. Issuing an arrest warrant for a member of the royal family was unprecedented. The royal family, for centuries, had relied on protocol, discretion, and diplomacy to resolve conflicts. Legal confrontations of this magnitude, especially involving criminal allegations, were virtually unheard of. Yet the evidence left no room for doubt. Unauthorized access, deliberate distribution of private medical files, and international transmission to a journalist constituted a clear violation of UK privacy laws and data protection acts. The warrant was the logical, if dramatic, next step. Kate's team had coordinated meticulously with law enforcement agencies, both in the United Kingdom and abroad. Scotland Yard, the Metropolitan Police, and international legal authorities were all involved, ensuring that the warrant could be executed no matter where Meghan traveled. Timing, precision, and secrecy were essential. The goal was to apprehend Meghan in a way that preserved the dignity of the royal family while enforcing the law. Inside Kensington Palace, the atmosphere was tense. Advisors, legal experts, and palace officials convened in quiet rooms, reviewing procedures and preparing for every possible scenario. The arrest warrant was a formal legal instrument, but it also carried symbolic weight. It signaled to the world that privacy violations, even by high-profile individuals, would not be tolerated. And for Kate, it was a necessary step to protect her family, uphold the law, and reclaim control over a situation that had spiraled beyond private boundaries. But executing an arrest warrant for someone as public and internationally connected as Meghan was fraught with complications. She traveled frequently, had a network of supporters, and was adept at managing media narratives. Coordinating an arrest required international cooperation, careful monitoring of travel plans, and ensuring that every step adhered strictly to legal protocols. Kate's team worked tirelessly to anticipate every contingency, knowing that any misstep could undermine the case and create a public relations nightmare. The warrant itself was comprehensive. It outlined the charges, detailed the evidence, and specified the legal jurisdiction under which the action was being taken. It cited specific breaches of the Data Protection Act, unauthorized access to confidential medical records, and transmission of sensitive files to external parties. Every element was carefully documented to withstand scrutiny in both domestic and international courts. Kate understood the magnitude of what was unfolding. Issuing a warrant against Meghan was not just a legal maneuver, it was a declaration. It said that no one, not even a member of the royal family, was above the law. It underscored the seriousness of privacy violations, the need to protect sensitive information, and the consequences of deliberate breaches. Meanwhile, Meghan's movements became the subject of intense monitoring. Her travel plans were scrutinized, flights tracked, and accommodations mapped. Legal teams coordinated across borders, ensuring that if Meghan attempted to move, evade, or delay, law enforcement would be ready. Every detail mattered: timestamps, locations, potential security personnel, and even the timing of media releases. The world was watching, and the slightest error could tip the scales. Inside the palace, Kate felt the weight of responsibility. She was not only pursuing legal justice, but also safeguarding her family's privacy and well-being. The files that had been leaked included her children, private consultations, and even the Queen herself. The stakes were deeply personal. Every action she took had to balance legal necessity with familial protection, public perception, and the broader integrity of the monarchy. The issuance of the warrant also sent ripples through media circles. Headlines erupted globally. Meghan Markle targeted by international arrest warrant. Royal scandal escalates to legal action. Princess Kate takes unprecedented legal stand against Duchess. Social media buzzed with speculation, theories, and divided public opinion. Supporters of Meghan decried the warrant as heavy-handed, while supporters of Kate praised the decisive action. Amid the cacophony, the royal family's careful orchestration of the process aimed to prevent misinformation from spreading and ensure that the facts remained central. Legal experts noted the unprecedented nature of the case. Never before had a royal faced an international arrest warrant for allegations involving private medical records. The intersection of privacy law, international jurisdiction, and high-profile public interest created a complex legal landscape. Kate's legal team had anticipated this complexity, building a strategy that accounted for domestic prosecution, international cooperation, and potential defenses. The emotional stakes for Kate were immense. She had to navigate a fine line between personal vindication and public perception. Pursuing legal action against a family member, even indirectly, carried the risk of being portrayed as vindictive or overly aggressive. Yet the evidence was compelling, the breach undeniable, and the protection of her family non-negotiable. Every decision was weighed carefully, every statement considered for its implications, both legally and emotionally. As the warrant circulated among law enforcement, the countdown to action began. Meghan's potential movements, media statements, and public appearances were all monitored. Legal authorities prepared to act at a moment's notice, coordinating across time zones, agencies, and jurisdictions. The situation was tense, volatile, and unprecedented. Then came the first hint of resistance. Meghan's team, already aware of the impending action, began preparing statements, legal defenses, and media strategies. They suggested that the allegations were overblown, that any access to files had been inadvertent, and that any distribution to journalists was misinterpreted. The public would soon witness a clash of narratives, the legal facts presented by Kate's team versus the counter-narratives constructed by Meghan's representatives. Despite these developments, Kate remained resolute. The arrest warrant was not about personal vendetta, it was about law, privacy, and justice. It was about protecting her children, her family, and the monarchy from further intrusion. Every piece of evidence had been verified, every legal procedure followed, and every risk anticipated. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reverberate across continents. But the drama did not end with the issuance of the warrant. What happened next? Meghan's immediate response while in transit would shock the world, challenge legal norms, and escalate the situation far beyond what anyone had imagined. The calm, careful planning of Kate's team had led to a moment of unprecedented tension. The international arrest warrant had been issued, the evidence was irrefutable, and the royal family braced itself for a confrontation unlike any before. Yet, even in that moment, one question loomed over everything. How would Meghan respond to being pursued across borders by law enforcement and by the relentless scrutiny of global media? The answer, when it came, would push the story into new territory, combining legal drama, personal betrayal, and global intrigue in a way that no one could have predicted. But what came next would stun the world and the royal family, and set the stage for a legal and public spectacle that would dominate headlines for months. The world watched as Meghan Markle's reaction unfolded, and it was nothing short of explosive. The arrest warrant had been issued. The evidence was overwhelming. Yet Meghan, accustomed to commanding attention and controlling narratives, was not about to respond quietly. Within hours, her legal team sprang into action, preparing statements, drafting counterclaims, and setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation that would captivate the globe. Inside Kensington Palace, Kate's team monitored every move. The evidence suggested that Meghan had been aware of the impending legal action before it was formally executed. Whether through her legal advisors, media contacts, or her own sources, she seemed prepared to push back. The Duchess of Cambridge had anticipated resistance, but even she was taken aback by the speed and intensity of Meghan's response. The first sign came in the form of a carefully worded statement issued by Meghan's legal team. It was polite, almost perfunctory, but the subtext was unmistakable: denial, deflection, and strategic positioning. Any suggestion of unauthorized access is categorically denied, the statement read. These claims are based on misinterpretations and unverified reports. Ms. Markle has acted in good faith at all times. To an outside observer, it was a standard legal rebuttal. But to palace insiders, it was the opening salvo in what promised to be an aggressive campaign to counteract the mounting evidence. Meghan's team did not stop there. Parallel to the statement, her representatives began compiling documents of their own. Emails, access logs, and communications were organized to suggest that any interactions with the files were legitimate or accidental. It was a preemptive move, designed to muddy the waters, create plausible deniability, and frame any legal action as excessive or politically motivated. Kate, however, remained calm. She had anticipated this reaction. The evidence in her possession was clear, documented, and compelling. Each unauthorized access, each file transferred to a U.S. journalist, was traceable. The pattern suggested deliberate intent rather than accident. And Kate understood that legal battles, especially those involving high-profile figures, were as much about narrative as they were about facts. Meanwhile, the media erupted. Headlines flashed across screens worldwide. Meghan denies breach of royal records. Duchess claims innocence amidst arrest warrant drama. Kate versus Meghan, legal battle escalates. Social media buzzed with speculation, memes, and opinion threads, dividing public sentiment almost evenly. Some sympathized with Meghan, viewing her as a victim of an overbearing royal system. Others rallied behind Kate, praising her decisiveness and her defense of family privacy. The journalist in the U.S., still holding copies of the files, faced a dilemma. To publish or not to publish became a matter of ethics, legality, and risk. Any release could be construed as complicity in a criminal act. Yet, the story was too sensational to ignore. Legal experts warned of severe consequences, while editors debated the public's right to know versus the privacy of the royal family. The tension was palpable, the stakes unprecedented. Within this maelstrom, Meghan's own choices became central. She had a history of media-savvy moves, interviews that shaped public perception, and the ability to pivot narratives to her advantage. Her response to the arrest warrant was strategic, calculated, and emotionally charged. Insiders suggested that she viewed the legal action not merely as a challenge to her privacy, but as an attack on her credibility, public image, and influence. The palace, meanwhile, tightened security. Communications were monitored more rigorously, internal files were scrutinized for vulnerabilities, and legal counsel coordinated with cybersecurity experts to prevent further leaks. Kate's focus remained unwavering: protect her family, enforce the law, and navigate the increasingly complex interplay between media narratives and legal strategy. One of the most striking aspects of Meghan's reaction was the duality of approach. Publicly, she maintained composure and a veneer of innocence. Privately, her team worked tirelessly to analyze every piece of evidence, prepare defenses, and identify potential weaknesses in Kate's case. It was a high-stakes chess match, played across borders, with every move carrying legal, emotional, and public consequences. In addition, Meghan reportedly reached out to allies, both within the U.S. and abroad, to rally support. Friends in media, former colleagues, and even sympathetic public figures were engaged to manage narratives, craft statements, and influence public perception. The legal action against her was no longer purely a courtroom matter. It had become a battle for hearts, minds, and reputation on a global scale. Despite the intensity of Meghan's response, Kate's resolve did not waver. The evidence, meticulously documented and authenticated, provided a clear path forward. Access logs, timestamps, and file metadata left little room for ambiguity. Each unauthorized download, each transmission to a journalist, was a tangible demonstration of intent. Kate's legal team was prepared to present this evidence in court, confident that the facts would outweigh the strategic maneuvering by Meghan's defense. But the emotional stakes were just as high. Kate had to balance public composure with private feelings of betrayal. Meghan had once been embraced as family, a figure of warmth within the inner circle. Now, the same person was at the center of a legal storm, accused of deliberately violating privacy and endangering the personal lives of those Kate loved most. The emotional complexity was immense, requiring careful navigation and strategic restraint. As the situation escalated, social media played a critical role. Fans and detractors alike weighed in, creating trending hashtags, viral discussions, and polarizing narratives. Some depicted Meghan as a victim of a rigid institution, while others praised Kate's decisiveness and adherence to the law. The digital landscape became a battlefield, amplifying every statement, action, and rumor. Kate and her team had to carefully manage public communications to avoid misinterpretation, sensationalism, or misinformation.